Bitcoin getting crushed again. It is now off 16% since hitting all-time highs earlier this month.
But the bank also pointed to tens of billions of pounds in extra savings by households who have not been able to spend, but at some point could be unleashed. Another much-needed shot in the arm.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Focus on Finance. In this new series of programs, we will inshallah take a closer look at the fascinating world of finance. We will be covering a wide range of topics and inshallah explain in simple terms some of the complex concepts that we find in finance. We will, for example, in the next program, look at the various economic systems that there are in the world and also look at the Islamic economic system. In each program, we will hear from experts, from the general public, and inshallah in future programs we hope to hear from you, dear viewer, and hear your views and answer your questions. This week I'm joined in the studio by Murabi Shameem Jamal Ahmed, who is a missionary based in Mauritius, and Niazi Hoolash, an accountant by profession. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
A wise person once said a good place to start is at the beginning. So for Focus on Finance, our first program will be on what is finance and why it is important. Earlier on in the week, we asked some members of the general public what they thought finance was. Let's hear what they had to say.
C'est l'économie pays. Roulement, on travaille.
Tout ce qui a rapport à l'argent, je veux dire, acheter des choses. Ça peut être des choses basiques, je veux dire, pour manger, tout ça, mais les propriétés, voilà.
Oui, tout ce qui contient l'argent. L'argent, bien sûr.
À l'idée, finance, comment nous, sur les taxis, pensez qu'il est bien difficile à faire, on va dire, pour gagner, pour trouver finance là tous les jours. Et le dia est terrible, on va dire, nous faisons travailler une journée, à soir les jours. Pour pouvoir besoin la case.
Alors, finance, ça veut dire ça qu'on veut comprendre là. On m'a dit en général là. En général, il travaille, même pour la case, même. On va parler moi. Du secteur. Du secteur en général.
Ben, finance, il concerne l'argent, il concerne la manière qu'il l'argent va gérer dans le pays, hein, parce qu'il l'argent se valeur, c'est la Banque Maurice qui donne lui ce valeur. Donc, finance, pour moi, il englobe tout ce qui est à trait avec donne ce valeur à l'argent.
So some interesting views from the public there. Niazi Saib, from your perspective, what is finance?
Depending on whom you ask, the definition of finance widely varies, as everyone speaks of finance by reference to what it means to him or her, often at a given time, as we've seen in the interviews. The central point, however, is that it has to do with money, or monetary value, or simply wealth. Finance refers to the broad framework that deals with how you earn money, spend money, save and invest your money in order to build wealth. And it is my view that finance is as relevant to an individual as it is to an organization, a company, and to countries. It is relevant to any social construct that is involved at some point in time with the transfer or preservation of monetary value. So for me, finance deals as much with the money in your wallet as it deals with more sophisticated matters at country level or at company level.
So in summary, it's everything around money and the management of money and the transfer of money in society.
Yeah, it's a broadly encompassing concept.
Yeah, I think that's how most people would understand it. Rabbi Shameem, from the Islamic perspective, what is finance and how important does finance play a role in Islam itself?
Shafique said, quite surprisingly, the Holy Quran is a religious book by its nature, but it has spoken extensively on finance, on money, as we've just defined finance being anything related to money. So the Holy Quran has spoken at length on this subject. And the Holy Quran even has instructed believers that they have to manage their finances in a responsible way and in the best possible way. So in Islam, the believers have been given a list of do's and don'ts concerning money. how to earn it, how to spend it, and also most importantly, how to use money or how to deal with finance in such a way that we can achieve the true purpose of our life, which is fulfilling the rights of our Creator and the rights of the creation. This basically is something quite extraordinary from an Islamic perspective, that we use money and finance, which is a very important way, which will enable us to achieve and realize the true objective of our existence here on earth.
Yeah, and that's from the Islamic perspective. In the secular world, in economics and so on, what other aspects or highlights around finance that you think are important, that makes finance important in today's day and age?
Well, I think my first thing is actually to react to what Murabbi Shameem just said. It is quite astounding when we hear what Islam says about it, simply by the number of aspects in which it just dovetails with what we see in the secular world. Today in finance, I think the main difference would be, apart from using money for your own purposes and for the purposes of advancing humankind, which is what Murabbi Sahib just said, I think what we see today in terms of money in the secular world is that money is often used as well as an end in itself. Whereas I see the difference with Islam is that it's a means to an end. So today, if you look at finance today, you talk about the economic crisis, etc. What we find is that people have got so sophisticated around money that often in certain situations, we find deals being done and banks going bust and people losing a lot of money they've saved in some sophisticated instruments. So it tells me that, yes, finance today has got very complex, and it makes me wonder that whether there needs to be a return to basics in terms of finance, in terms of money.
Yeah. Well, inshallah, we'll be covering some of these complexities, as I've said, in future programs, not least in one of the programs where, inshallah, we'll be looking at what is money and how it's created, and then how the banking system works. But in Islam itself, it is important, finance and how to use it, and there are some principles which you've touched on, but there are also other principles and concepts that Islam, that Allah teaches us in the Quran. For the interest, I think, is one, and perhaps zakat. Can you please tell us a little bit more about these?
Well, basically, Shafique said, when we talk about money and wealth, so contrary to some other religion, Islam does not regard wealth as an obstacle to moral and spiritual progress. As we've just mentioned, it is a means actually to achieve that progress. Islam does not promote monasticism, to live in seclusion, not to be involved in the daily life in the society, to work and to make a living. Islam does not promote such a lifestyle. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, clearly said, La rahbaniyata fil Islam. There is no monasticism or living in seclusion in Islam. This is very important that we should highlight this point. And secondly, we're talking about money and wealth. So Islam does not stop believers from enjoying, the good things of this world, which can be acquired partially through wealth, through money. We all know this prayer. We've been reading it in our salat every day. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. O our Lord, give us the good things of this world. Wa fil akhirati hasana. And also the good things of the world to come, the hereafter. وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and save us from the hellfire. So the Holy Quran does not stop believers from acquiring the good things that were created by Allah Ta'ala for our comfort. And also Islam recognizes the need for man to deal with money, to work, to earn, to sustain himself and his family. Very clearly the Holy Quran states in the 2nd chapter, Surah Al-Baqarah, that the man in the house is the head of the family. He has to work, he has to earn and sustain him and his child and his children and wife. So, but the Holy Quran and Islam stresses on the fact that to acquire wealth, is not the main goal in life. This is where really we draw a line with what we see today in the society around us. Like Niazi Sahib just mentioned, Islam says that alongside when we acquire wealth and we acquire money, there's a purpose behind that. And one of the main purpose, as I highlighted in the beginning, is to serve the poor, the destitute in the society. And the Holy Quran, in many places, Allah, the Almighty, has promised great blessings for those who use their wealth, to seek Allah's pleasure by serving His creation. And the Holy Quran briefly has also, very severely warned those who engage blindly in those materialistic pursuits. The Holy Quran and Islam, God tells us in the Holy Quran that, all this blind rat race, will end in anguish and despair, because one day you will have eventually to leave everything behind you. So Shafique said, in a nutshell, since the Holy Quran, Islam recognizes the need, the importance of finance, of wealth in the running of the society, so it has laid down clear instructions concerning several aspects related to the management of wealth. Like you mentioned, interest and zakat, so both at an individual level, also at the government level, instructions and principles concerning trade, concerning interest, concerning the regulation of the market, inheritance, taxes, and so on and so forth. So inshallah, going ahead, we'll have the opportunity to speak on some of those important Islamic principles about money and the economy in general.
Jazakallah, it's a wealth of future topics to be covered. Some of the aspects that Shameem Sahib were talking about the social aspects of finance and the benevolence and charity. I wonder if you share my view or my observation that the capitalistic world is moving towards that. You have some ESG, these CSRs as they call it in the jargon, and some high-profile billionaires, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, etc., who are making a big play of being philanthropists, giving their money to charities and so on. Is this a move toward, is this a recognition of the shortfalls of capitalism in your view, or a move towards Islamic values?
Well, definitely. I think it's a move in the right direction. I think it is the need of the hour. If we look at the situation the world is in today, we can, without fear of being very mistaken, say that they are doing the right move around 15 centuries after Islam. Okay, already stated what needs to be done, but it's a good thing. So in fact, if we just go maybe a couple of decades ago, you find that in the era of business, okay, let's say in the 80s, 90s, even up to the early 2000s, the focus really was being bigger, richer, better, controlling more, etc. And as businesses became better, as the inequalities, okay, just became deeper, we find that this is when the laws around monopolies or too much power, etc., started being enacted to break it. Why? It's simply because that wealth amassed by the few, which is a hallmark of capitalism, started showing its shortcomings. There were certain social problems created by that, certain safety, security problems. Now we see in the current day and age, just look recently, there were the Paris Accords which were signed. People are talking about the climate warming, and I think there is a general consensus that is real. So money is being diverted to take care of the creation of God, which is nature, right? People are talking about sustainability more, and that was something which would be riled upon just a decade ago. Today in the laws in Mauritius, for instance, and in many countries, there is a requirement for companies to pay certain taxes which will go towards corporate social responsibility. Increasingly, corporations are realizing and countries are realizing that there needs to be a way to redistribute income so that the vulnerable in society have a fighting chance or a decent living wage. The debate in the world today is about a universal basic income. So, and all these things, when you look at it from an ethical perspective, is something which makes sense. But it is something which made sense all along in Islam for for centuries. And I think it is just a recognition that the world is coming to the realization that the blind pursuit of wealth to the expense of anything else is just not sustainable.
Definitely.
And as you rightly said, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and I was reading more recently, Daniel Craig, the Bond 007 actor, is saying that he thinks he's not going to let his kids inherit most of his fortune because it's just immoral. And I was reading that today, Warren Buffett was saying, it is okay to leave enough wealth to your kids for them to be able to do anything they want, but not that much wealth that they will not want to do anything. So I think it's the world is moving this direction. Is it moving at the same pace in other quarters of the world? No. But I think there is a general awareness happening, which I think is a good thing.
Shafique, adding on what Niazi just said, it's quite amazing how, without knowing it, those, materialistic people, they are espousing Islamic principles. Talking about, the distribution of wealth among children. This was something that was initiated 14, 15 centuries ago by the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The illiterate Prophet of Arabia, who knew nothing, who according to the West knew nothing, seated in the desert, with some Bedouins, giving the world such principles, economic principles that today, in the 21st century, big experts and, directors of big companies, they are coming to realize that actually, Niazi Sahib spoke about, the wealth in the hands of a few. But if you look at a simple glance at the economic system of Islam, inshallah we'll talk about that. The very purpose of that is to avoid this, that accumulation of wealth. It's really amazing to see how unknowingly they are espousing those principles that will bring equity and peace in the society.
I think let's move on. I had the privilege of speaking to an expert, the economics editor of Review of Religions, Ahmed Daniel Arif Sahib, who's based in London. And I spoke to him earlier and I asked him initially just to introduce himself. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, first of all, I was born and I brought up in France, so I've been really interested in economic issues more generally. And I've studied economics up to a master's degree. After that, I took some free time to write some books and some articles in French as well as in English. The first one was in 2016, and it was entitled Islam and Capitalism, and the second one on the economic history of early Islam.
Daniel Sahib, what is finance and economics?
So although they are often taught and presented as separate disciplines, economics and finance are interrelated and inform and influence each other. And the focus of economics is more on the big picture, I would say, or general questions about human behavior around the allocation of what we call the real resources. And so at its very heart, I believe economics is the study of people. So it seeks to explain, what drives human behavior, decisions and reactions when faced with difficulties and successes. So it combines, politics, sociology, psychology, but also history. The focus of finance is slightly different. It is derived from economics, but more specifically, it involves assessing money, credit, investments, and other aspects of the financial systems. But again, as I said, economics and finance seems to be converging in some respects. They are interrelated disciplines that inform each other, even if the specifics are different. So they both affect our daily lives in both obvious and subtle ways. So from an individual perspective, economics frames many choices we have to make about work, consumption, and how much to save, for example. And our lives are also influenced by what we call the macroeconomic trends, such as inflation, which is simply put the continuous increase in price, prices, but also interest rates, economic growth, employment prospects, which is affecting our living standards. But I think one more thing to add is that it's always forgotten, but economics as a discipline was originally the science of managing a household. Then it became a subset of religious, theological, ethical, and philosophical disciplines. So it also have an important moral and ethical component. Obviously, little by little, it seems to have become something quite different, but I'm always taking the example of Adam Smith, which is the so-called theorist of modern capitalism. So who knows that he was first and foremost a professor of moral philosophy. And contrary to many assumptions, his work entitled, his most famous book, The Wealth of Nations, it was not written to show us how to make a lot of money, but rather how to promote fair and equitable relationships between human beings. So the message hidden in all economic discourses, economic textbooks, is, I believe, rooted in ethics and has to do with human values and the kind of society we want to build.
In your experience, how does the general public view finance?
Generally speaking, people think it's a very technical discipline because it involves figures. But as I said to you, it also, it's at its very heart, it's also the study of people. It seeks to explain, what drives human behavior, decisions. It combines politics, sociology, but also psychology, but also history. So this is why it is perceived as technical, but this is why it is. That's why it's so interesting at the same time.
How would you describe or define finance?
Well, finance is more the techniques, or I would say the tools of managing money, as you said. So as a discipline, it is derived from economics, but more specifically, it involves assessing money, credit, investments, but some other aspects of the financial systems.
So some interesting points from Daniel Sahib there, very much in line with what we were discussing, what finance is and so on. Inshallah, we'll be hearing a lot more from him in future programs. The interview was a bit longer, and he's a wealth of information about economics. Niazi Sahib, looking forward to the future programs, what other topics are you looking forward to that the viewers can look forward to in the series Focus on Finance?
Yeah. Thanks Shafique Sahib. I think I would be interested to explore further areas like banking, credit, investment, how to manage your personal finances. Mm-hmm. It might seem very simple, but definitely it is an area where people could do more. Also, probably around careers in finance, mm-hmm. And just so people understand maybe how the career of finance is evolving and what are the sort of basic skills you need to thrive in such a field going in the future. And eventually, I think any series of programs will be incomplete if we don't talk about countries' finances and probably how individual finances, corporate finance, the country finance, how they all merge together. Mm-hmm. And if there are any better ways than what we see today of managing, of running, of delivering financial services, which takes into account the interests of everyone, mm-hmm. and every single person towards an objective of prosperity.
Oh, excellent. And from your side, Shameem Sahib?
Shafique Sahib, well, when we'll be studying or going through all the topics that Niazi Sahib mentioned, surely we will be highlighting the shortcomings and what is not working. Mm-hmm. So me, personally, I look forward to present the economic system in Islam as the solution for what we are seeing today. We will, inshallah, when we will talk about interest and and capitalism, we will see how there are, shortcomings, and there are things that could be done in a better way, as we've talked about that earlier. So I will look forward to present those principles that were mentioned in 15 centuries ago, but are relevant in today's society, in today's financial world. And these principles, as they are God-given, we believe they are God-given, so we will try to portray those principles to convince our viewers that this actually is the only solution, that they have to espouse those principles if they want to achieve prosperity, as Niazi just said.
No, thank you. I also look forward to those topics. Personally, I'm looking forward to the whole concept of money itself. What is money? How the banking system works, and the surprising fact that many people don't realize is how money is created and how much of it is based on a belief system rather than actual tangible things that you can hold. And it's surprising, and it's something that even in the financial world, many people don't realize that that's the reality, and then contrasting it with the Islamic system. Thank you very much. So it remains for me to say a big jazakumullah to our panelists in the studio today, Niazi Sahib, Shameem Jamal Ahmed Sahib, jazakumullah, and a big jazakumullah also to Daniel Arif Sahib in London, who, as I said, we'll be hearing more from him in future programs. Jazakumullah for your attention, and I hope you found it very useful and informative. And I hope you can join us, inshallah, for future programs on Focus on Finance. Assalamu alaikum.